Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. Are squat shoes essentially heel elevated squats? Putting 10-pound plates under your heels, is there a difference? What is it? By the way, after your advice, I do my squats barefoot. More or less, yes. So it's not squat shoes, they're called weightlifting shoes. And by weightlifting, they mean Olympic lifting. Because of the nature of Olympic lifting, they need to get into deeper squat positions. Because in order to do a full clean, you have to drop into a full squat. Okay, that is not the squat we're doing for power. And for powerlifting purposes, you only need to break parallel or go a little bit below parallel, depending upon the federation that you're competing in. And for most people, heels like that are not going to matter. They matter when you're trying to get really, really deep. Right, really deep. And if you look at a lot of Olympic lifting when they're doing a full squat, they're sometimes going 4 or 5 inches below parallel. I do not recommend this for general strength and hypertrophy. And that's a bit of a controversy as to why that is. A lot of coaches agree. And there's nothing wrong with doing it for the correct purpose, right? If you're going to do weightlifting or you want to really get good at cleans, it might behoove you to do that, to get good at doing those deep full squats. But it's not necessary for size and strength. It's just not. And we could argue that it may actually be not the best at all. But when you put the plates under your heel, you're simulating weightlifting shoes. The difference is, of course, that the plates under the heels are dangerous. I don't recommend anybody ever do this, because essentially you are walking out and then stepping up onto something with a weight loaded on your back. Plates have the risk of slipping, other stuff. If you're going to do this, get good quality weightlifting shoes if it's important for you to do that. And on top of it, if you think about it, you wouldn't be able to use those plates anyway. So if you're doing this sort of squatting to get good at really, really deep squats, full squats, it's not going to carry over anyways, because you're not going to be able to do the plates when you clean. Okay, because you can't land back on the plates after you jump. Right? You can't land back on the plates. So the plates really become useless. But for biomechanic purposes, yes, it's more or less the same thing. Although your plates might be, depending upon the heels, may or may not be thicker than the actual heels. All right, next question. Are devices like a Fitbit, Apple Watch, that a good way to figure out what your caloric intake needs are for beginners? Of course, my answer already there is no, they are completely useless. Okay, these Fitbits and things like that, anything that you're using as a calorie tracker, I want to be very, very clear. They serve no purpose at all. Okay? The only purpose they serve is for you to spend money and obsess over something. They're not going to help you, because they don't tell you how many calories you're burning throughout the day. In fact, we could argue that even they're reading what you burn in the exercise isn't right. But you're not tracking all your other stuff. And a very, very large amount of our calorie burn comes from our NEAT. And NEAT is dynamic. Okay? NEAT is dynamic. That's your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It actually represents one of the largest parts of your calorie burn. And it's dynamic. It changes based upon what you're eating and how just active and fidgety you are. So people who increase calories, their NEAT goes up. People who reduce calories, particularly when carbs go up or down, your NEAT goes down, because you move less. You have to actively move more. So your problem you run into is that these things just measuring your exercise and all this, it's not very useful. Even knowing your resting metabolic rate and going and getting hooked up and all of that outside of research purposes isn't very useful either. The best tool that you can use to figure out your caloric needs is to track your calories every day and weigh yourself every day and look at the trend. Okay? Look at the trend. You will be able to, within a week, 7 to 10 days, you will be able to hammer down and know your maintenance calories. Okay? You'll know your maintenance calories. But the thing that people need to be aware of, we have metabolic adaptation. And that metabolic adaptation is largely due to NEAT and thermic effect. And it's temporary. So people say the silly stuff, and this is one of the biggest scams in the industry, has been the reverse dieting thing. That's a scam. And every good expert and medical expert and registered dietitian, plenty of them have called it out as being a scam. It is. And the same thing with metabolic damage. These things aren't real. These adaptations can be reversed quickly. They can be reversed very, very quickly. So in other words, if you've been bulking really hard and you drop your calories really low, your maintenance will drop down within 2 weeks. It'll drop down a lot. Same thing if you've been cutting. Go back to your maintenance calories for 2 weeks or a small surplus, your adaptations will flip back around. The only ones that'll be really permanent will be the changes in tissue weight, because even losing or gaining body fat or muscle will affect calorie burn. But realistically, you can do this by just tracking your calories and watching for how much you weigh and how much the scale changes. You can get it dialed in pretty quickly. And just keep in mind, once you have a baseline, you can then adjust from there. So if you're trying to gain weight, and let's say you go 2 weeks with no gain in weight gain, and you've been in a small surplus, you're going to need to add a little more calories, add a couple hundred calories. Same thing with weight loss. You'll have to keep up with the minor adaptation that occurs over time. But this will give you a baseline. All you really need is to track your calories and to weigh yourself at the same time every morning, consistently. And you can hammer it down very, very fast. All right, next question and last question of the week. Hey, could a Z press be used to replace standing overhead press? I'm 6'8" and my house is not tall enough for me to overhead press. I've been doing them outside when weather allows it, but looking for an alternative until I can find a home with more room. I actually have a client who's over 6 foot who runs into the same problem in the room he's in. He can't do standing presses. So in his case, when we want to do shoulder work, we do a lot of seated pressing. Which again, you're doing the same thing with a Z press. You're basically kneeling down or sitting on the floor. So you could definitely replace it for that. It's not going to have the exact same benefits of the standing press, because it is a slightly different movement, but it's pretty close. And if you can't do a standing press, it's certainly an acceptable substitute. I have no issue with it. The other thing to look at too is incline benching. Okay, a lot of people, and this came up before, like Doug is a perfect example. He linked me, he saw a page where trolls were literally smack talking and saying, oh, Jason's full of crap, he doesn't have people who can overhead press 200 pounds who don't train the press, except that Doug is public, and I've linked Doug's press before. Doug is a public client. We don't train the overhead press for Doug. He can strict standing press 200 pounds on a max. We don't train that lift. People say, well, he's maxed out. That's training it. No, we max on it every couple of months. We just ramp up and do a single. We don't work on that lift in between. He's got a very strong incline bench. We train his upper back. He does a lot of rowing, and he does a fair amount of incline benching. The guy can incline bench something like 305. So accordingly, he has a strong overhead press without training it. So if you're also in that situation, something to think about if you're just trying to build your overhead press, in his case, he's overhead pressing more than his body weight without even doing the exercise, because strength carryover is a real thing. Okay, strength carryover does matter. You build up the muscles and strength to do certain movements, close enough movements will have carryover. And in his case, the incline does it. So that's also an option for you if you really care about your standing press. If it's a big deal to you, you can still get stronger at it without even doing it if you put a lot of work into your incline and a lot of upper back work. So that's also an option for you. So just letting you know that you do have more than one option there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.